Hey everybody, Mort here. It is time for a patch post mortem. We haven't done these since Galaxy's 1017, so it's been a while. But now that we're knee deep in a new set, it's time to pick these back up. And this is where we talk about the things we did in the patch, what worked, what didn't work, what we're taking away from it, and what we're going to be doing differently in the future. So with that, let's jump into it. And as always, these are for your benefit. If you don't find this useful, let me know, and I'll stop doing them. So. All right, we'll skip the B patch for a second and come back to it. Let's see here. Combat recap stuff. Obviously, this was good. Being able to see damage blocked, shielded, things like that has been fun. 5 seconds off, no big deal. Okay, champion probability. I'll be honest with you. So this was the change where we removed 5% from level 8 and put it into level 2. Or from the 4 cost to the 2 cost. This change, I think, was a band-aid to the real solution. We were dealing with a problem with too many four cost 3 stars. And I think this was the lightest version of the solution we could have done. But the reality is it didn't move the needle that much. We're still seeing a lot of these at level 7 even, which shows that the probability wasn't the big factor here. And we'll talk about it in the 1021 rundown. But I think the real answer is when you have 11 champions and they're showing up, and the odds get reduced even further with the shop mechanics. That combined with the chosen mechanic, combined with Nico's from Fortune and things like that, that was actually the real problem here. So looking back, I kind of wish we hadn't done this. Now, you'll be asking yourself, well, then why don't you revert it? And the reality is we might at some point, but typically with these kind of changes, we don't like to do set whiplash back and forth, constantly changing how it works. And we are still seeing people level to 8 anyway for the extra army, things like that. So it's not having an adverse reaction. But I kind of just wish we hadn't done it in the first place. The positive here is we did learn from what happened here, so take it for what it is. But yeah, in the end, I think this didn't really hit the problem that we were trying to solve with it. So, okay, Cultist 3. This nerf was to try to bring down Cultist 3 in the early game. I think that was successful. Cultist 3 was a lot weaker this patch. Wasn't quite the instant free win streak that it was before, but still good. So this was solid. Dusk 6 nerf. This one was another one that I think we did a really good job with. The Dusk 6 nerf was warranted. Dusk 6 was overperforming because it is a chase trait, but it's one of the easier chase traits to get. All you need is a chosen or a spatula or a 5 cost. Like, you don't need all of the above. And this one brought it down in power, which was good, but 6 Dusk is still a very desirable comp. So this is the kind of nerf you want to see in TFT, where you take something that is too strong, you nerf it, and it's still fun to play and it's still good, but it's not overbearing. That is a perfect kind of nerf, so we want to see more of that. Next up is the Keeper 6 buff. This is another example where I think we tried something light to see if it would solve the problem. It didn't. I think Keeper 6 especially is still something you're not really going to do very often. And so I think Keeper has other problems that we'll have to address in the future. But I will say I'm actually glad we made this change because it helped highlight that fact. This is the right kind of change. Rather than jumping to like a rework or a bunch of big adjustments first, I'd rather us try something like this to make sure that that's even necessary. So that is a big positive here. Mage 3 getting the 10% spell power. So this one I'm on the fence on. I'm glad we did this. It has made Mage more viable in the early game. Yeah, I think overall I'm just glad we did this. 75, there was an argument for 75 here and going a little lighter. But we are seeing 3 mage builds now, which is good. Obviously, the most exciting of which is the Veigar build. But 3 mage actually feels worth running now. It also taught me a little bit about the mathematical percentages like a small trait should give a little bit here. Because this trait is granting your 3 mages 60% extra damage, which is a lot. Plus double utility. That's a lot of power, but it is only for 3 units. Compare that to Dusk, which is only granting 20%. But Dusk is granting it to your whole team for a 2-piece. So in the end, I think this was the right call. I'm glad J-Bach made this one. So yeah, good stuff. Spirit. This is an interesting one because we've been damned in the past for... This was nerfing Spirit 10% from 90 to 80. we've been damned in the past for going too hard. And to Static's credit, J-Buck, he actually wanted to have this be 75, and I was the one who was like, nope, let's not be overbearing, let's not overkill it, let's do 80. But the reality is we were just way off the mark on this one. And so you'll see in the B patch where we brought it down all the way even to 70, and it's still probably good. So I'm glad we have B patch as a mechanism, but this is one of those instances where we should have been more aggressive. And sometimes it's hard to tell which ones you should be light touch, sometimes you should be heavy touch. That is one of the challenging things about balancing TFT. So in this one, right direction, wrong amount. So, okay, fortune buffs. Okay, overall, the fortune buffs were great. Fortune went from something that everyone was calling a meme comp and no one would play to people are playing fortune. And in fact, at our highest elo, if you get a fortune Tom Kench, it's like, yes, free top 4 because you are getting a lot of gold. That being said, though, I think we went a little too far, and you'll see this in the 1021 rundown. But I think here, in the 0, 1, and 2 section, Fortune became a little bit too much of a, I can run it, and I don't even care what happens. I don't need to win streak, loss streak, or anything. I just throw it in, here comes free gold, and it was a bit too much of that. So that's an area where I think we kind of messed up. And you'll see another area we messed up too, which is like the 5 costs at 4 losses. But thankfully, we're going to be pretty quick to clean this all up. So again, this is another one where like directionally, this was very good. Fortune buffs were good. It's playable now. That's fun. But we didn't quite get it perfect. So you'll see a few more details in the next patch. All right, Diana. This was the Diana 1 and 2 buff and the Lysandra 1 and 2 buff. And I'll cover the Aphelios. Well, actually, let's skip Aphelios for now. So the Diana and Lysandra 1 and 2 buffs. I think these were actually correct. Yes, I got memed a lot for the buffing Moonlight and making their mid-game easier or whatever, but actually this was just correct. Diana's a little bit more useful in the early game and feels like a real champion. Same with Lysandra. Lysandra has other problems with her Dazzler trait, but these were just correct changes, so I'm happy we made these. Nami getting the longer stun duration. This, probably overall correct, but I will say one of the best builds right now is the Elderwood Mage build, and it involves having Veigar, and sometimes if you didn't get Veigar as a mage, you can run Lulu and Nami. Mage having Lulu and Nami is a lot of CC, like a lot of CC. So I do agree Nami needed a buff. I'm not sure throwing in more CC was the way to do it. And this is where we go back to like all the way to set design, where it was like making sure that, you know, 2 people had that much CC in the same trait structure. But for now, it seems fine. Like, Nami's not making or breaking any metas or anything like that. She's useful now. People are buying her. People still don't really go Nami Chosen, other than the Bubble Bobble build, but, you know, it is what it is. So, this one I'm okay with, but directionally would have liked to do something a little different, but it is what it is. Vayne attack speed. This is a good change. It didn't move the needle enough. This is another one where we talk about severity, and it's like, Vayne needed the attack speed buff. It was good she got it. Does it mean people are now running Vayne carry at 1-cot? No. No, it really doesn't. So she'll probably need more love in the future. The fact that people mostly ignore Vayne Chosen is a pretty bad sign. Although that's another weird problem Vayne has, which is like, if you take her for Dusk early, you can't get the later Dusk units till later, so it's hard to commit to Dusk. I do take her with Sharpshooter a lot, though. I've personally found a lot of success with any Sharpshooter chosen, so... But something to keep in mind. Excuse me. Annie 1 and 2 buffs. These were great, actually. These cleaned up a lot of Annie's weaknesses and actually made her a little bit more playable, opened up more mage builds, more fortune builds, things like that. So this was a good change. So, happy with that. Aphelios. Okay, so I want to talk about this one a little bit separately than Diana and Lysandra. So, this buff was correct. I think buffing Aphelios 1 and 2 was fine. I don't think it changed anything. I think most of the Aphelios builds very quickly got their Aphelios to 2-star, 2-starred everything else, which made Moonlight make it 3-star, and most people were running 3-star Aphelios, so it didn't matter. But I have to call out that Aphelios continues to be a nightmare of design. And I'll talk about this now. And to be honest, I don't know when we're going to be able to change this. Maybe in 10.22, maybe in the future. But Aphelios is just kind of a big miss on our part. And a lot of you are going to go, yeah, it's that GA interaction. No, it has nothing to do with the GA interaction. GA interaction is a separate conversation, but GA Aphelios is no different than GA Kennen. It's no different than, any GA Swain from set 1, things like that. Being killed while in GA is just, it is what it is. It's frustrating. But no one's running GA Bloodthirster, i.e. Aphelios, and dominating lobbies, right? Like, that's just not how Aphelios works. The problem is, Aphelios' spell basically says gain 100% attack speed for this long. Which would be fine, right? We've shipped that before with Xayah, things like that. But the problem is, Aphelios' spell stacks on itself, basically. Imagine if we made Xayah that said, gain 100% attack speed, by the way, you're not mono-locked, gain another 100% attack speed on top of that, and then another 100% attack speed on top of that. That's basically what the turrets are doing at 2 cost. If you told me Aphelios was a 5 cost, whatever. But it breaks a bunch of things. It's way too bound to Ginsu's. And it's way too feast or famine, right? If you hit that exponential curve to the point where you've got 3 or 4 turrets on the ground, you win! So, Aphelios is definitely a problematic champion. So for now, what you're going to see is in the future, you saw it in the B patch already, where we slowed down the growth of that exponential curve, so it's harder to hit that point. And then you'll see the GA interaction being removed, just so he's not as frustrating. Because, yeah, by the way, that's the other thing. It's a buff that says plus 100% attack speed and ignores your status effects. So you can keep attacking while you're CC'd or blinded or anything like that, which is insanely powerful. So we're kind of going to nerf him pretty hard for a bit until we can remake him. But the frustrating thing here is, like, if you throw in Aphelios into, like, a normal hunter comp, he's just not a real champion. He's basically a warm body. Like, he's just so bad by comparison. And so that's something we'll have to deal with and we'll have to clean up. And the reality is, like, when you're designing a set, you have to take some risks. So props to the set designers for taking some risks. But this is one of those ones that we'll learn from. We'll learn from and get better. So, all right, Hecarim buff. I think this one was fine. This was a light touch. It's not really changing the game where people are, like, playing a bunch of Hecarim builds and things like that. But, it's fine. It's a good buff. Not a big deal. The Jax buff. Jax attack speed buff and starting mana buff, or total mana buff. So the attack speed buff here I think was right. It makes Jax feel more like a duelist, which is good. He gets to attack fast, feels good. The mana buff was the correct direction, but a bit too far. We did a big buff, which Jax kind of needed. No one was buying Jax in 10.19. And now people are buying him in 10.20, and we're actually seeing 3-star Jaxes be played in Duelist builds, and Duelist is now a thing. It's given Duelist some defensive options, which is good. He is just a little powerful for a 2 cost. But overall, I'm glad we made this change. It opened up a new build. Duelists are more exciting. The Divine side has other problems. But overall, good change. Jinx spell is now an actual spell instead of auto attack override. This was just a necessary evil. Honestly, though, this change is fine. It didn't change much. If people still haven't figured it out by now, it made Ginsu's worse on Jinx. But there are Shojin blue buff builds that are even better than the old Ginsu's build, so it is what it is. Xin Zhao, 30 mana, and now properly flows through the basic attack system. I'm so glad we made this change. Tanky Bloodthirster Xin Zhao is now actually pretty decent. So that's pretty cool. The 30 mana lets him cast more often. Though, to be honest, this is another example where, like, I'm glad we made this change. Directionally, it was right. Probably still not enough. Xin Zhao still got some fundamental flaws, which is, like, if his special misses, he still takes way too much damage. He's not really tanky enough to get into that situation where he's got that 85% damage reduction. So hopefully we can get Xin Zhao even stronger sometime in the future. But again, directionally fine. So, Yuumi 3-star buff. Yeah, solid. 3-star Yuumi, good. No problem. Okay, Veigar. So Veigar now targets lowest health instead of lowest percent health. Veigar slight damage nerf at 4-star. And then Veigar spell growth nerf at 4-star. Then we had to B-patch it to lower Veigar more, which means like, oh, they did it wrong. I still think this was correct. I think Veigar's targeting paradigm is absolutely correct and good for the game. Mages needed something to make them not necessarily all front to back. Having something to actually threaten things like Ashe, Jhin, other things like that was good for the comp. That part I think is correct. Nerfing the 3-star was obviously correct because we had to nerf it even further. So that part was correct. The problem I have now with Veigar is that because of the way his spell power growth works, you don't actually have to itemize him offensively at all. And this is why we're seeing the 6 Elderwood build take off. Because the 6 Elderwood build is all about building a very tanky frontline, very, tanky group of units that's going to get very tanky over time. And then a Veigar that between the fact that he's stacking his AP through his ability, through Elderwood is gaining even more AP, can build blue buff, usually it's blue buff, Gunblade, and then from there it's either QS or Hodge. Ends up just kind of being really hard to deal with. Even just blue buff plus Hodge is auto attack, instant kill 2 targets. I don't think he should have that much power for that ability, like that ease of access. So I'll be honest, hopefully in the future, I think we're going to have to nerf the spell power gain even more, is kind of where I see that. But again, I do think the targeting paradigm was right for the game. The other big thing I'll call out is that his mana might be 10 too low, maybe. I feel like if we nerf that even harder, though, he'll just be unplayable. You kind of need that fantasy, so... could also see a world where the 1-star version ends up a little worse, just so it's harder to stack him early on, things like that. But still some work to do with Veigar. The other thing we are seeing is, like, unless you 3-star the Veigar or get the Kayn late game, it's often not a first-place comp, so maybe it's actually in an okay spot. But I do think that unlimited spell growth is what's actually causing the issue here. So, all right, Riven 3 nerf. Yes, and in fact, need to do it even more, but Riven 3 nerf definitely warranted. Shen buff. This was good. I think this Shen buff was really good. I still don't think we're seeing a lot of people play Shen comps yet, especially with Ninja still being a bit of a trouble. Ninja and Adept are both not great traits right now. Ninja still blows my mind a bit. Adept makes a ton of sense. And Mystic's actually even a little underpowered. So I think that's what's starting to hurt Shen, but I'm glad we made this change, and hopefully that continues in the future. Lee Sin buff to 40 mana. Yep, solid. Made Lee Sin better. Great. Set starting mana. This was a big nerf to Set. People are definitely still playing Set, so I think this was correct. I think it was a little severe. We went from 50-125 to 75-175. If you told me this was like 60-160, that would probably feel about close to correct. A lot of the times he doesn't cast once before doing his sit-ups. But he is still a unit with basically a built-in GA that comes back and does true damage. So he still works in a lot of comps. So again, I'm glad we did the nerf. Maybe a little much, maybe not. But Yone buff, this was good. Yone is starting to see some play, which is nice. Maybe even needs a little more. Maybe a little bit, but probably not. Yone is probably the 3rd best 5 cost right now under Kayn and Azir. So I don't think we need to go too much further. And then Zilean can't ult himself. I know this one made a lot of players sad, but the reality is this was absolutely the right call. Zilean can now be countered by killing him, which is great. Zilean's still very strong. If we have to buff him a little more later, fine, but people are still running Zilean. They're happy to run Zilean, so I don't think that needs much. Ludens, slight buff to Ludens. It didn't move the needle. This was same with Static Shiv. We did the light buff, didn't move the needle. So next patch you're going to see a bigger swing. Again, I think this is necessary for us, though, to do the light touch into the heavy touch so that we don't overkill things. So I'm glad we did this step, but the reality is it didn't solve the problem. Sunfire nerf. Sunfire nerf I actually think we nailed. This made it... It's still a very good early game. It's still very much worth building. But by building it early game, you're giving up a lot of power late game. Fights are not that long. Like, frontliners die pretty quick. And so if you built a Sunfire, you're basically down an item in the late game. So kind of glad we made this change. Sunfire now feels like a balanced item. Still very strong early, but falls off a lot harder. Bug fixes, we definitely should bug fix. And then B-patch. So yeah, like I said, the Spirit nerf, we had to go harder. The Aphelios, we had to slow down his curve. Janna was actually just fixing an issue due to the way our layers worked when we did the Janna nerf initially to get ready for launch. Unfortunately, that didn't end up in our main branch due to an error on someone's part. And so that just was us fixing the issue. Ashe is an interesting one because Ashe is was probably the single best top 4 comp in the game. If you had an Ashe early, congratulations, your top 4 rate was insane. It wasn't necessarily first placing more lobbies than anything else. I think Ari actually had a higher first place rate, but Ashe was just such a dominant top 4 that she had to be brought down a little. And so we went really light on the B patch to see if we could open up the meta just a little bit, because she is a healthy champion and we expect the Brawler Ashe build to do well, but it was too much of a guaranteed top 4. And then Veigar we already talked about. So that's it on the patch. Interestingly enough, as you're watching this video, I'm about to record the patch rundown right after. So you'll see a lot of the changes coming in 1021 are meant to kind of shore up some of these things we messed up a little bit or clean up some of these things. And to be frank, we still have a lot of work, right? Like, there are still traits that are suffering, things like Adept, Dazzler, Keeper. We still have some champions that kind of feel like non-buy. And so over the next few patches, you'll see us continuing to make progress on those. But one thing I do want to call out is you often see a lot of people go, hey, nerf this, nerf this, nerf this. That's probably not going to be our tactic. Something like Kayn, for example, who jumps in and quickly assassinates your backline. Yeah, that's his job. The trick is making sure that there are options to deal with it and other ways to win. Not make Kayn a boring guy who does barely any damage to the backline. So don't expect to see us over nerf a bunch of things that are working. Expect to see us buff a bunch of counter options so that more things are playable and more things can succeed. So, all right, that's going to do it for this patch. That's going to do it for this patch post-mortem. As always, leave your thoughts. If you have any questions, let us know. Until next time, take it easy.